Ethan poured his soul into his work. Every project, every late night, every missed family dinner. It was all for the company he loved. So when the day came, the day he was called into that cold, sterile office, he expected a promotion, a bonus, a pat on the back. Instead, he got a box for his belongings and a handshake that felt more like a shove out the door. It was fired. The first few weeks were a blur of anger and disbelief. How could they? After everything he'd given, he replayed every meeting, every decision, searching for the mistake that led him here. The silence from his former colleagues was deafening. He felt rejected, abandoned, like a failure. The world he had built crumbled around him, and in its place, a vast, empty silence. He spent days staring at a blank wall, the silence his only companion. But slowly, something shifted. The anger began to fade, replaced by a strange sense of calm. The silence wasn't empty. It was quiet. It gave him space to think, to breathe, to hear his own thoughts for the first time in years. He started painting again, a hobby he'd abandoned in college. He reconnected with old friends. He took long walks, not going anywhere in particular, just moving. One afternoon, an old friend mentioned a small nonprofit that needed help with their marketing. It was a huge pay cut, a tiny office, nothing like the corporate giant he'd left behind, but they were passionate, their mission clear. Ethan hesitated. 10-side Jess. And as he started working, something clicked. He wasn't just managing campaigns. He was helping people. He wasn't just chasing targets. He was making a tangible difference. This time, he didn't feel anger. He felt gratitude, because that door closing had forced him to open the right one. Success didn't change Ethan, but clarity did. He learned that being fired is not failure. Rejection isn't rejection, it's redirection. And silence isn't emptiness, it's preparation. Most importantly, he learned that you don't find your purpose in comfort. You find it when courage meets pain. If you're watching this, feeling lost, tired, or left behind, remember this. Not everything that ends is a loss. Not every delay is a denial. And not every closed door is a punishment. Sometimes, life removes what no longer fits, so you can finally step into what does. What if the worst day of your life was actually the beginning of your best story? This is about Ethan, a guy who thought his life was over. He was just fired, not for making a mistake, but for not being passionate enough. Standing outside a cold, glass building, holding a box with his sad little desk plant, Ethan felt completely numb. For years, he'd been a ghostwriter, pouring his soul into words that were never his own, chasing a paycheck that barely covered rent. He had dreams of writing his own stories, but fear always held him back. Fear of failure, fear of not being good enough. Now, it felt like his worst fears had come true. That night, alone in his small apartment, the silence was deafening. He opened his laptop, not to apply for another soul-crushing job, but to do something he hadn't done in years. He started writing. Not for a client, not for a boss, but for himself. He wrote about the feeling of being invisible, about the quiet desperation of chasing someone else's dream. He poured out all his frustration, his disappointment, his buried hopes. There were no clever marketing angles, no SEO keywords. It was just raw, unfiltered honesty. Then, with a shaky hand, he hit publish on a small, forgotten blog and went to sleep, expecting nothing. The next morning, his phone was buzzing like crazy. Ethan woke up to hundreds of notifications. He thought it was a mistake. But as he scrolled through the comments, his eyes widened. People were writing things like, "This feels like my life." Another one said, "I really needed to read this today." And whoever wrote this, thank you. The words were from strangers, but they felt like friends. By that evening, thousands of people had read his post. His story, his feelings, were resonating with people all over the world. He wasn't invisible anymore. his heart pounding with a mix of excitement and anxiety. Could this be real? During the video call, the editor, a kind-faced woman named Clara, asked him a simple question that cut right to the heart of everything. She asked, "Ethan, your writing is incredible. Why did you ever stop writing for yourself?" Ethan took a deep breath, the kind you take when you're about to admit a truth you've hidden for years. He answered honestly, "Because I was afraid no one would want to read what I had to say." Clara smiled gently and replied with words that would change his life. "Fear steals more dreams than failure ever will. This is your second chance, Ethan. Don't waste it." He accepted their offer. It wasn't a massive, life-changing contract, but it was real. It was a chance. For the first time, writing didn't feel like a chore that drained his energy. It felt like therapy. It was healing him. Each story, he wrote, chipped away at the wall of fear he'd built around himself. Weeks later, one of his short stories about finding courage in unexpected places went viral. Then, months after that, brands started reaching out, wanting him to tell their stories, but this time with his name attached. His voice. 1 year later, almost to the day, Ethan found himself walking past that same tall, glass building where he was fired. He paused and looked up at the windows where he used to sit, feeling invisible. He wasn't that person anymore. He was a writer. His own writer. His worst day hadn't been an ending. It was the messy, painful, and absolutely necessary beginning of a life he was finally passionate about. So if you're feeling lost right now, maybe it's time to write your own first chapter. On Monday morning, Ethan Carter walked out of a glass building with a cardboard box in his hands and a storm in his chest. By Friday night, the same man would stand in a place he never imagined, realizing that sometimes losing everything is the only way to find yourself. This is not just a story. This is a reminder for anyone who feels forgotten, rejected, or stuck. Ethan had given that company 7 years of his life. Late nights, missed birthdays, canceled vacations. He believed loyalty mattered, but loyalty didn't sit across from him in the conference room that Monday morning. A calm voice said, "We're going in a different direction. No anger, no emotion, just paperwork." As Ethan packed his desk, he noticed something painful. No one looked at him. People typed. Life moved on without him. By the time he reached his car, his hands were shaking. How will I pay rent? What will I tell my parents? Was I never good enough? That night, Ethan sat alone in his small apartment, lights off, staring at the wall. For the first time in years, he felt invisible. He was a ghost in his own life. The next few days were cruel. Job applications vanished into a digital void. Rejection emails piled up, each one a tiny paper cut on his soul. No replies. His savings shrank. His confidence disappeared. He stopped answering calls from friends and family. Stopped shaving. Stopped believing. On Thursday evening, while walking aimlessly through the city, trying to escape the silence of his apartment, Ethan saw a homeless man sitting on a cold pavement. The man was carefully tearing his sandwich in half, sharing it with a stray dog huddled beside him. Then, the man smiled a genuine, peaceful smile. That smile confused Ethan. How can someone with nothing look so peaceful? He wondered. As he walked past, something compelled him to stop. He reached into his pocket, pulled out the last few dollars he had for the week, and quietly handed them to the man. The man looked up, his eyes kind and clear, and said something Ethan would never forget. "Son, sometimes life pushes you out so you can walk toward what's meant for you." Those words followed Ethan home, echoing in the emptiness of his apartment. They felt less like advice and more like a key. That night, instead of opening another soul-crushing job site, Ethan opened his old laptop. Buried deep in forgotten folders was something he hadn't touched in years. He's writing. Before corporate life consumed him, Before spreadsheets replaced sentences, Ethan loved storytelling. He used to write late into the night, stories about hope, about struggle, about people finding their way in the dark. He had stopped because someone once told him, writing doesn't pay bills. But now, he had nothing left to lose. He had no bills he could pay anyway. With a strange sense of freedom, he started to type. The words flowed out, not because he was trying to impress anyone, but because they were a part of him that had been silent for too long. He wrote a short story, poured his own feelings of being lost into the narrative, and posted it online anonymously. No expectations, no promotion. He simply sent it out into the world and went to sleep, feeling a little lighter than he had all week. The next morning, on Friday, he woke up to a notification, then another, and another. His story had been shared dozens, then hundreds, then thousands of times. People were leaving comments. Not just good story, but deep, personal messages. This is exactly how I feel. Thank you. I needed to read this today. Your words helped me. Ethan scrolled through the comments, tears blurring the screen. For the first time in a long time, he didn't feel invisible. He felt seen. The world hadn't moved on without him. It had been waiting for him to show up as himself. He wasn't Ethan Carter, the Ladoff employee. He was a writer. He was a storyteller. That Friday night, Ethan stood by his window, looking out at the city lights. He still didn't have a job. His rent was still due, but the storm in his chest was gone. It was replaced by a quiet, steady glow. He realized that the life that had been taken from him wasn't his real life at all. He had been pushed out, just as the old man said, so he could finally walk toward what was meant for him. If you're feeling lost or forgotten right now, remember Ethan's story. Sometimes, the end of one road is just the beginning of your true path. Your value isn't defined by a job title, a salary, or the approval of others. It's defined by the unique gift you have to share with the world. Maybe it's time to open your own forgotten folder. What have you been told doesn't pay the bills? What passion have you silenced? Don't let the world miss out on what only you can offer. Thank you for watching. If this story resonated with you, please consider subscribing for more content that inspires and uplifts.